Hello, everybody, and welcome to Radio Dead Air Tech Q&A. You've got questions, we've got guesses. I'm Nash. Been doing Radio Dead Air for ages. In addition to that, I'm also an IT professional. With me, as always, my producer, Mike Gehrman, who also works in IT. If you have tech questions, please send those to requests@radiodeadair.com. We'll try and help you out with them. I'm going to preface this week by saying that all of the news we're talking about is completely up in the air now, because we have entered into a bombing campaign in Iraq. I mean, not Iraq, in Iran. We're effectively at war now. So we're going to have to deal with whatever that does to oil prices and shipping, because that's the Bering Strait. That's one of the biggest shipping ways. And
not the Bering Strait.
Not the Bering Strait. Strait of, what is it?
Hormuz?
Yeah, well, there's one that goes right by there that it's like a major shipping way, and oh boy, and 1/5 of the world's oil supply. So everything is up in the air right now, in terms of tech and business. So we'll talk about this, but yeah, it's not great. Persian Strait of Hormuz, Hormuz. There you go. Thank you. Yeah, so right. This sucks, man.
Indeed.
Well, let's get to actual. I guess we might call this good news, in its own weird way. So we are familiar with Elon's Me Too attempt. Not that Me Too attempt, not the horse. The attempt to make his own LLM chatbot AI, because
with booze and hookers.
Yeah, OpenAI had one, Google had one, and now xAI.
And neither would let them play. Neither would let him play in their playgrounds because they don't like him. I mean, Sam sort of did, but then said no, get out. And he's trying to sue over that. It's still going on, I believe. I'm not sure.
So one of the things all of this AI stuff is dependent on is hordes of investment, because they are just burning through money and producing nothing. Absolutely nothing.
There's a Tom Lehrer quote, which I'm sure he got from somewhere else. I think it's from Shakespeare. And it describes AI across the board perfectly. Full of sound and fury and signifying nothing.
Especially not profit. So, I think it's stuck in my tooth. Pardon. Excuse me. Hold on a second.
Some of those little dental picky things.
Here's Sarah and Katz again, real quick. Hold on. All right, got it. There you go. Live, everybody. Okay, there we go. Anyway, so what this story indicates is, I can't say for certain definitively that this is a question of the bubble popping, or if this is just
people don't like Elon.
Yeah, well, his credit is garbage. But news leak this week that xAI tried to get a new round of funding, $5 billion debt sale, which is effectively saying, you loan me this money, we're going to owe you this money, and it's effectively a very complicated loan.
Okay, so before we continue, I want to say something. We are not financial advisors. None of this is financial advice. We're about to talk about stuff that we, as tech people, don't know necessarily very well, which is bonds. I had to look up terms in this. I had to Google terms in this before we did this. And I read stuff, and I still don't understand it, mostly.
But there is one important point of this that everybody will understand. So they tried to issue bonds. It's effectively a complicated way of getting a loan.
Yes.
And they said, hey, well, 12%, we'll pay back 12% on all this. You know, we'll give you 12% payments on us. And nobody bid.
People weren't buying. Now, here's where I started looking up stuff. So it says in the article, high yield bonds tend to be higher risk because you've got to pay people more in interest. Are giving 7.6%, and they're getting buyers. Elon is having to go 12.5% and maybe not getting buyers. Part of this is because when a company issues bonds, they have a reputation, especially if they've issued bonds before. They say, hey, here, based on our reputation, here's what we're issuing bonds, here's our percentage rate, people buy. People don't have a reputation for xAI because they've never done this before. And it's tricky dealing with Elon.
And when he previously went through and grabbed billions of loans from banks and other folks, he famously could not pay them back to the point that xAI bought Twitter, which is essentially just a complicated shell game in order to make the loans look like they'd been paid off, when in fact all the stuff was just transferred to a different company. And this one is even more unprofitable somehow. And right,
when you have no products.
Yeah. The average yield for these were 7.6%. That people would buying at 7.6%. Elon had tried to offer it at 12%, almost twice the going rate to attract people. And that didn't work. So we had to add another 0.5%. Well, now, for you who are trying to like get a car loan or something, or like extra 0.5%, kind of that sucks, but it's not that big of a deal. We're talking $5 billion. So a 0.5% on bonds and loans of $5 billion is a lot of money to have to pay back.
It's an extra 25 million. Keep in mind, bonds pay yearly, maybe more often, sometimes less. I don't know. Again, this is stuff I had to look up. I don't know this stuff. So that may be well more than 25 million. And of course, the deal with bonds is there are some bonds that are so high risk because there's no guarantee you'll get paid back.
Well, yeah.
And I would put that AI bonds into that, not just Elon's. If Sam Altman were to issue bonds, I would put that in the same category. He would probably get a better interest rate just because he has a slightly better reputation.
Of all of these AI companies, OpenAI has the best reputation. And if any of them had a chance to turn a profit, OpenAI would have been the one. None of them are going to turn a profit. They are all running billions.
So I don't know if you saw, it's not in our news story, but you mentioned OpenAI. Ed Zitron's been posting all week about how Microsoft and OpenAI are arguing over debt and who's going to owe what to who and who's going to buy what from who and where money is coming from. And Microsoft, the impression I'm getting from Ed Zitron's articles is that Microsoft is getting really pissed off and may just walk away. If they do, OpenAI is kind of toast.
Yeah. And once that one of these starts pitching over, that's going to act like a domino. For this one, though, xAI, we're talking about a model that on Twitter this week, it gave answers. It's about talking about cat turd. I can't believe we have to talk about that seriously. It was giving answers about cat turd based on Media Matters and Rolling Stone. And Elon said, I'm going to have it reprogrammed because it shouldn't be using those sources. So it's already proving that this is not a serious freaking piece of software.
And I will say, based on what I saw of that same thing, they were technically correct answers.
Mm-hmm. But the fact that
but they didn't like them.
The fact that these are affected not just by whim, but by whim of somebody who's incredibly stupid and demonstrably so, probably is not reassuring investors, I have to say. So we'll keep an eye on this as we can. I guess you might call this as good news, but in a different way than the headline indicates. So one of the CPUs that's been hard to get for gamers for a while has been the 9800X3D. It is the hot gaming chip. It's also
very
rather
popular,
expensive.
Very powerful. Oh yeah,
it's rather expensive, and it's been hard to keep, in stock. So AMD has finally, they're going to be producing a 9600 X3D. Now, the difference here is this is going to be 6-core, 12-thread, but it will still have the extra 3D cache. It will be slower than the 9800 X3D, but it will also be cheaper. And I think the reason this one is coming out is there are two other chips in the stack. There's the 7900 X3D and the 7950 X3D. Now, the way the Ryzen 9000 chips work is on the 6 and 8 core, they use a single CCD, or a core, pretty much a CPU unit. And that one can have up to 8 cores on it. The 6-core version it has 8 cores, but 2 of them are disabled because it's a lower yield. It didn't work as well, so they just disabled 2 of the chips and they sold it as a 6-core version.
Makes sense.
The 7900X has 2 6-core CCDs. So it's 2 6 cores, and there is a lag when they talk back and forth to each other. And the 7950X has 2 8 cores, so it's fully working. Now, the X3D models of both of those only have the cache on one of those chips, and they have notoriously been a little slower or having scheduling issues between the core that has the extra cache and the core that doesn't. They've gotten much better about this. However, in most instances, the 7950 X3D doesn't act like a 16-core CPU in terms of games because of the X3D. It tends to act more like an 8-core CPU, 8-core 16-thread. And that's the same thing with the 7900 X3D, except that one tends to act like a 6-core 12-thread. Meaning, in practice, the 7900 X3D, even being a 12-core, 24-thread CPU, was, depending on the game, slower than the 9800 X3D because it was an 8-core, 16-thread, just the one CCD. So, what?
You know that GIF of the guy who's got all the pins on the wall and the yarn and everything going between them?
Mm-hmm.
I almost need one of those to follow along when you get like this.
It's simple. 7900 X3D, 2 6-core chips, right? Only one has the extra cache, right?
Okay.
That means when you compare it to the 9800 X3D, which is an 8-core 16-thread with the extra cache, it's only acting like a 6-core, not a 12-core.
Got it.
And that's why the 7900 X3D has been one of the poorest sellers in AMD stack, because it effectively, even though it's more expensive than the 9800 X3D, it's, for gaming purposes, it's slower. Now I have the 7900 X3D, which is the 99, I was 9700, 9900. My God. Anyway, I have the 7900, which is the previous generation, and that one's not X3D. But the reason I got it is 12 cores, 24 threads. I use it for streaming. I use it for rendering and gaming. So I kind of use it for mixed use. And those extra threads come in handy for doing, stuff like this and for but at trying to market it for gaming with that extra cache RAM, it wouldn't be as fast as the 9800X3D. So it looks like what AMD did was finally went, okay, why don't we just sort of make less of the 9900X3D and just take that one CCD that has the extra cache RAM and just make it its own CPU by itself and make it cheaper than the 9800X3D. So that's where this came from. It's probably
the price is good. I like the price.
Yeah. Well, that's the estimated price because the 7600X3D is around 300. So this is probably going to be about 350. Still pretty expensive. And if you compare that to like the 9600X, which is about a $200 part, that's a bit of a premium just for gaming purposes. But it will be pretty fast for games. Hi, Charlie. Though, what's really exciting here is by putting this into the product stack, I get the idea you're going to feel some downward pressure on the 7600 and the 9600, which are their 6-core 12 thread. But if we could drop those more below $200, these are still great chips, even though they are the cheap ones or the lowest ones on the Ryzen 7000 and 9000 product stack. They're still really good. And this could depress prices on those a little bit, which would be nice to see, because one of the things that have been keeping people from moving to the AM5 platform has been the price of the platform and the fact there is no Ryzen 3 on that platform. It's all been Ryzen 5, 7. So there hasn't been really a budget model for the platform. So pushing the price on that down more seems to be better. I mean, if you are a gamer who absolutely wants the fastest, absolutely needs this, it's a nice option. Because the 9800X3D is close to $500. That's crazy for a 6-core 12 thread just for gaming. That's kind of nuts. But gamers, that's how gamers is. Last news story this week. Less good news for Intel. We mentioned Intel has a new CEO, has had for a little bit, and it looks like what they are planning to do is pull back even more on manufacturing. Now, Intel had already been retracting from manufacturing, they spun off their fabrication. They're trying to just pull away from that as much as possible and just focus on engineering like AMD has done. AMD used to have their own fabrication as well, too. They sold that off. Now they go all their fabrication through TSMC. And while they are at the mercy of TSMC's prices, they've also turned to be a better profit that way. All they do mainly is they don't, AMD doesn't make their CPUs. They just design them, and then they send the designs to the fabricator, which is TSMC. It looks like Intel is planning to try to do the same some more. They already were trying to do this, but now they are cutting back up to 20% of their factory staff, which is rough.
Huge.
This is on top of the last generation they released, which was, I will point out, the Core 200 series, the Core Ultra 200 and all that. Technically, in terms of the technology, they are a big advancement over the previous ones. They are a huge improvement over the 14 series, 13 series. The only trouble was they were not a performance improvement. The technology was better. The fact that they were able to eliminate hyperthreading yet maintain this close to the same speeds than as the previous generation was remarkable. That they're doing it at lower power rates is even more remarkable.
Indeed. And let's face it, we need, in a number of ways, lower power computing to be a bigger thing, especially you, NVIDIA. We're looking at you.
Yeah. Yeah. So the fact they were able to eliminate multi-threading, they were able to reduce the power level, and they were able to maintain the same performance is a pretty remarkable technical feat.
Yes.
But the market, especially desktop, especially gamers, do not want the same performance at a higher price. They want more performance. And that's what the Core 200 series did not provide. And that's been rough for Intel, where AMD is still just owning the market. It's got the 9800X 3D. They own gaming. They have the fastest, overall stuff.
And the article does say here that, because Intel also hasn't been producing AI specific chips. And that is a point. If they were, they'd probably be selling quite a few of them because that's still in a boom until it isn't. But it may come out and help Intel in the longer run because they won't turn around a year from now or whatever and have just tons of inventory on their hand that they can't move because the AI bubble finally burst.
And even AMD, they have a couple of ones that have an NPU processor and they build them as AI, but you'll notice those aren't desktop parts.
No,
those are very specific laptop parts. They're for Windows Copilot and Windows 11 and all that crap. The Windows Copilot certified crap. And they're not in huge demand. People have been actively avoiding AI at any laptop that has AI on it. They don't want that crap. So in the long run, Intel being a little slow to the AI market might help them because it's a crap market. It's very bad. So that might help them in the long run. We're going to have to wait and see, but it's not a good sign right now that they are contracting and scrambling to try to turn things around. Even though their technology right now is really impressive. What they managed to, I will say, just looking at the Core Ultra series, it had to be done. Intel had to do it because otherwise their processors were no longer scaling properly because all they could do, the only option they had was more voltage.
Indeed.
More voltage. That was their only move to keep increasing performance.
And the whole taking out hyperthreading because of continuing security vulnerabilities was a good call. The hyperthreading was a great concept when they first came up with it.
Oh, yeah.
And it lasted a number of years. And the fact that it's hugely, massively more technically difficult to secure eventually made it so that it was costing them more money to try and secure it. And then, of course, researchers would find ways around that. Then it was worth. So dropping it and redoing, as you said, Core 200, going, hey, look what we've done now. There we go.
Yeah, they dropped hyperthreading but kept performance. That is an architectural feat. Lower power, like in terms of efficiency, the Core Ultra series, I'm trying to. There are good things to say about it because I recognize it's an accomplishment. It's just there's some other decisions around it. The fact that its performance is not an increase, the fact that they've said that the motherboard is only getting one generation off of it, which is really going to disappoint early adopters because they gambled on Intel, and if Intel burns them with a single generation motherboard, they aren't going to be happy at all. So Intel's in a bad way. We'll have to see how this continues to shape up for them.
Yeah.
All right. That's news for this week. Let's get to your questions. We got a couple. Let's see. Any new ones come in yet? No, just the same ones we had before. Not a lot this week, but it's all right. It's not the quantity, it's the quality. Let's see here. So, all right. This is from Frost, is our first question here. I've been thinking about getting a new PC for gaming and been browsing some pre-built options. Are there any pitfalls or considerations I should know when comparing pre-builts? One I notice is that a lot of them use Intel 14th generation. Are they still having voltage issues? Okay.
So I would say the first thing to consider with pre-builts is make sure that they're actually using stock parts, especially for things like power supplies and things like that they're not using some weird custom power supply that if it goes, you have to replace it with another one of those custom power supplies.
Yeah, lots of pre-built manufacturers, particularly Dell, Lenovo, they have a long history of this. They will, instead of using off-the-rack parts, they like going to a motherboard manufacturer and buying in bulk. They will, for some inexplicable reason, design their own motherboards that are non-standard. They don't use standard power supplies. They don't use standard front panel connectors. They don't use the standard ATX layout. In doing so, those motherboards are forever married to the cases and power supplies they came with, which means they can't be easily serviced. If the power supply dies, you have a piece of junk, unless you can somehow manage to get that exact model of power supply from Dell or from Lenovo or from the manufacturer. They don't make those available commercially. So that's the first one to note. You don't want proprietary systems like that. You want to make sure that whatever system you get is using normal, standardized parts that even if they are a custom model, like, for example, the used motherboard I bought for my server, the media server, was slightly cut down. It was an Asus TUF motherboard, but they removed some of the connectors from it and they removed some of the features from it. And yet it still followed the 24-pin power connector, the front panel headers standardized. It still had the ATX form factor for where the screws fit in place. And it was a pre-built. Asus has been pretty good about their pre-builts are standard. Let's see, what other companies? I think MSI to some degree, but not as much. Origin, but I would kind of avoid Origin PCs right now, especially their higher end stuff. It's not been going well for them in design wise. iBuyPower, CyberPower. What?
Zotac?
Zotac. They're making computers?
Apparently, Zotac, yeah. Now, I say that. I'm looking at the computer on Newegg's site, and the problem I'm having with the computer is I don't see the power supply in the computer. It's all lit up, but I don't see a power supply anywhere. They may have just taken it out for or it's hot. Oh, wait. This is a thick boy. It's hiding behind a panel. Never mind.
Yeah, these look like standard off the rack stuff. Yeah, these are standard. These are using normal ATX parts from the look of it. I'm looking on their site. Yeah, so Zotac, they have standard stuff. iBuyPower, CyberPower. If you want to get really pricey stuff like Falcon Northwest and whatnot. Asus tends to be they use off the rack stuff as well. Yeah, ABS, that's Newegg's house brand that uses off the rack parts. That's the first consideration you want to keep in mind. And do not buy slim form factor desktop PCs. Those are all non-standard. You will never be able to upgrade those. They are forever stuck, whatever configuration you got them. Do not get slim form factors. It's bad for the long term. You can't upgrade them.
We can say that more generally about weird form factors. It might use completely standard parts. I saw one a couple years ago that the dune buggy sort of tube construction of car.
Yeah.
I saw a case that was a dune buggy style tube construction.
Yeah. But that's still an ATX case.
It's like, it looked weird and I didn't want to dig into it. It's like, I would never buy this computer just because.
Slim form factors, the reason why is they almost never use standard power supplies. They can't. There's no room in a slim form factor case for a standard power supply. So they always have these weird custom deals that never use the correct connectors. They don't even use the 12 volts. There are two power supply standards generally for motherboards. One is the ATX 24-pin connector. It is the big wide 24-pin wire that carries 12 volts, 3 volts, and 5 volts. The power supply itself does all the conversion from 12 volt to 3 volt and 5 volt. And it's got that. It's got an extra connector for your CPU, EPS 12 volt for there. And that is the main one that ATX uses. There's also another one called ATX 12 volt, which just outputs 12 volts to the motherboard, and the motherboard converts to 3 volts and 5 volts. But it's a very special kind of motherboard. It is a standard, but it's not a wide use standard. Still, a standard is a standard, meaning you can get off the rack parts. The main problem with most stuff like Dell and whatnot is you cannot get off the rack parts, and that's why they're best avoided, because when the time comes you want to upgrade it, say a few years from now, you're like, well, maybe I want to get a bigger power supply so I can get a better graphics card. If you don't have an off the rack parts, then ATX standard parts, you're not upgrading that power supply. You're not getting a bigger video card. Say you want to replace your whole motherboard with a new processor, new motherboard later. You're not putting it in that case because it doesn't use the ATX standard. The holes for where the motherboard lines up with the screw holes in the case, they're completely in the wrong spots. It's not going to fit. And the front panel connector, the connector for the power switch, the reset switch, your hard drive LED, and your power LED, it doesn't use a standard one of those either. So you won't be able to even turn the dang thing on. Hold on.
Sure.
Excuse me. I had a sneeze there. You made me sneeze, Grady. He's very fuzzy.
Now, as to the other part of your question, I've noticed that a lot of them use Intel 14th gen. Are those still having voltage issues? Technically, yes. You need to check the BIOS to make sure the BIOS update has been done to resolve that issue. They shouldn't be selling you a new one that's been damaged. But again, check the BIOS. Now, obviously, I would say you should search for an AMD on a pre-built, and there's plenty of places that make them, but that's me.
I mean, you can get a deal on the 14th gen just because of the bad reputation right now. The thing about the 14th generation CPUs is if you immediately update the BIOS, or the BIOS has already been updated for the motherboard, and it's never been turned on before, it's a brand new system, then there's not going to be a problem. At least supposedly, there's not going to be a problem. The problem comes in when these CPUs were using a bad BIOS that was directing voltage incorrectly and essentially frying the CPU slowly and degrading them. If they've never been used, if they've ever been turned on, they can't have been degraded. So buying a brand new 14th gen CPU and a brand new 14th gen pre-built system, you should be fine. It's only ones that have already been used. Those are of concern. And that even includes the used market for like buying a used CPU. It's completely up in the air. We don't know how the 13th and 14th gen are going to shake out in the long term, but yeah. So you might get a deal on the 14th gen because just the bad reputation, and it'd be perfectly fine because if the CPU is brand new, it should be perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But AMD is probably in the long term, in terms of upgrades and other options you have to it, you might want to go with it might be a little more expensive, but AMD might be the better bet in those terms. Hello. I miss you, buddy. Hello. Hello. Oh my god. Oh my god. He's snuggling tonight. Look at this snuggle, buddy. Look at you.
There must not be any other cats in the room because he's not grumpy.
Nope. Yeah, he's not grumpy. There's no other cats. He's look at this. He's a good boy. He's pretending to be a good boy. Would it be worth it to get a high-end 12th gen as a deal? Yeah, Rarity. Those are still, I mean, viable CPUs. Those are still contenders. If you want, and none of those supposedly had the problems. So if even used, I mean, the CPU I got for a media server is a used 12th gen. It's a 12600T, not a very widely used one. It's a low power part, but it was used, and that's why I went with the 12th gen, because, you know, it had the better reputation of them. I was looking for the Intel specifically for the media encoding for the QuickSync capabilities, and 12th gen was able to do it. All right. There's a quick one from Steph. Why did you get a reverse fan? Why didn't you just flip the fan you had the other way? All right. To explain this a little bit, my case, I talked about this at the end of last week. My case is a little weird because it's a cube shape and it's not quite doing the straight air in and then out the back and up the back, because it's dual chamber. It's a little custom. So my idea was I was going to bring air in the front and the back and exit it out the top, which seemed like it'd be a good idea. But in order to do that, I would have to get I would have to get a fan to pull air in from the back. So the fan I already have back there, it's 140 millimeter, and it's not a very good one. It's the Corsair QL 140, which I got a deal on. It was used like new, but performance-wise, it hasn't been very good. It doesn't move a lot of air unless I jack it really high, and then it gets loud. And then it kind of defeats the point of getting a 140 millimeter fan. I mean, it's designed more for looks. It's an LED fan, but it doesn't perform well for squat. So I thought I should get a new one of those. Now I could just get a regular one and flip it around backwards. But number one, not every fan works well that way, and I'll show you why.
There's probably some extremely complicated fluid dynamics reason.
Well, not really.
Okay, well, you said it was somewhat complicated fluid dynamics reason?
Well, no, it's actually fairly simple. This is the back of a fan. This is specifically the back of a this is I think it's a 140 millimeter fan, but this is what it looks like from the back. Yeah, we'll show you the difference. We'll show you one from the front, and we'll show you one from the back. Okay. And no. All right. So this is a 140 millimeter fan from the front. Okay. And this is a 140 millimeter fan from the back. What could possibly be causing an issue by throwing that fan into reverse? Or by flipping it around?
I'm waiting for the yes, the post's in the way.
Yep. They're made to drive the air in a certain direction. They're designed to drive the air past those posts, those support poles, to get the air out. Pulling the air through, flipping it around so that the air goes that way, you have 4 obstructions right in the way. Those can cause inefficiencies. Plus the way the blades are shaped. That's what determines where the air moves, is the curves of the blades. By making the fans reverse wise by flipping it around, they don't have to deal with any obstructions in the back, and it's works more like it was flipped around the front way. So it's a better design overall if you want to get more efficiency, and that's kind of what I want to do. I want to get more efficiency too, and also they look bad from the back. Because if I put this, I mean, it is a very shallow reason for wanting to do it, but if I put it in my case looking like that, it would look ugly. These aren't supposed to be, they have a front and a back, and the back is not very good to see. So I got this. They finally sent me my replacement after the other one showed up with the blade, with the blades broken off. This is a Fantex, what is it? D30 140 millimeter. I did a little bit of research to try and find the best option I could for this. One of the reasons it makes it better is instead of being 25 millimeters thick, it's 30 millimeters thick, which means the blades are thicker, so it can move a little more air. And in terms of speed and performance, it does pretty well. In fact, this does, weirdly enough, this does better on a radiator static pressure wise than just as an airflow fan, which is what it's going to be used on. This is going to be on a radiator, and it's going to be pulling in cold air or cool air from outside the case through the radiator into the case, just, backwards. And yeah, this is the back of it. You don't want to see that. That's the front of it. That's what you're going to see inside the case. Now, some of you are going, I don't care what it looks like inside the case. It's a computer. What it looks like doesn't matter. To which I say, screw you. It's my PC. I give a crap. But, and if you're wondering where the wires are, this one actually is managed that you can, this is made to be, you can click 3 of them together and then add wires to it. I'm just going to be using the one. But
yeah,
so yeah,
I have those. I have the Leon Lee version of that in my current case, where I click 3 of them together and have just one set. Yeah. Makes for a cleaner interior of a case when you've got multiple fans going.
So this will be once I get it installed and whatnot, it'll be pulling air through here out the front. Normally the air with a fan goes this way. It goes, the air, these blow and the air comes out the back. Instead, it's going to be going the other direction. So, and it's designed to avoid these obstructions. In fact, these are positioned in such a way that they are, instead of being more of an X, they're more parallel. You see, instead of being a straight up, X, they're a little more parallel. So these areas here, so they're designed to do this better. So that's why I did this. It wouldn't matter to everybody. And again, my use case is kind of specific. But yeah, that was why I did this. So there you are. Okay, last question. Oh boy, this one could potentially be bad. I'm just double check, see if we have anything else came in. At the sync. Sync SYNC, not SINK. Nope, no other new email. All right, so this is the last question for this week. Hi guys, I know what coil whine is, but my computer's doing something different. Yeah, it is. When I first turn it on and when I start gaming with it, it makes a very loud buzzing. It's not subtle. It's loud enough to be heard by everybody. I've been blocking it out with earbuds, but I'm worried about it. Don't do that. If your computer, all right, folks. I'm not, Eric, I'm not meaning to come down on you over this. I'm just going to say, if your computer is making a bad noise loud enough that your solution is, I'm going to put in earbuds so I don't have to hear it, that's not the solution. Yeah. He's asked, what's doing that? I've got an Asus G11 CD. Let's have a look at this system.
Which is a pre-built computer.
Yeah. Have a look at it. It's a little bit older. I think it's like an Core 6000 series.
Core i5, according to Amazon.
No, well, 6000 series.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, it's a little bit older, but it still works.
Okay. So the bad news is, one, that may still be coil whine.
I mean, it's unlikely. Coil whine normally isn't that loud.
It could also be a fan going bad.
Yeah, let's have a look inside. This is what it looks like on the inside. It's fairly simple, bog standard. The power supply is, the ketchup and mustard cables. It is off the shelf parts, so you can't upgrade this case later if you really want to. It's a little bit older. All right. The first thing to do, we want to check, yes, are the fans. You will have to shut your system off and slide the door off the side. This is what you're going to see inside your case. You see that there's that that circle, that fan with a circle that's firing straight down at the motherboard. That's your CPU cooling fan. You have that fan in the back, that square one that's pointed in the back of the case. That's the exhaust fan. First thing to do is, and the one above it, the fan above it, that's the power supply. Not a lot you can do with that one. First thing you want to check, make sure there are no wires that have somehow fallen into the blades of any of these fans. That would be causing the noise. That could be causing the noise.
Indeed.
That's like a bare basic check. You can go in there. Next thing to do is, with the side open, boot up your computer as normal and see if you can hear which part is making the noise. It's a little difficult to do.
One thing I would note, because I've had coworkers who've done this thing before, make sure your door is closed and small children and animals are not in the room, because they may be curious and wish to investigate.
Yeah. Another thing you can do is, and this is for the CPU fan, do this as briefly as possible. Okay. You can disconnect the fans from the motherboard while they're running. It won't hurt them. It's just like unplugging them. And see if the noise stops when you unplug a specific fan. The CPU fan, unplug it, but don't leave it that way for very long, because it's keeping the CPU from overheating. So you want to have that. You just take it off long enough to see if the noise stops. If it does, great. You've located the problem. Plug it back in. You're going to have to replace that fan. If it doesn't, another fan that could be causing it is the power supply fan. The trouble is, you can't unplug that one. It's built into the power supply.
But the good news there is, if you eliminate the other fans and you lean close to that power supply and you go, no, that's that fan, you're just replacing the power supply at that point. And that's not a terribly chunky power supply I'm looking at there.
No, it's not. That's a Garbo power supply. That is, I mean, it's ketchup and mustard. They're Garbo. There are also fans on your video card as well. But it might be easier to determine if they're making noises just if you unplug the other two, because that would eliminate those. Power supply, yeah, pretty much any power supply. Let me see if I can in computer enhance. Let's see if I can read that. Trying to read the voltage on the wattage on that.
360 watts.
It's a okay, so literally the cheapest off the rack power supply you can buy tends to be about $500. Not 500 watts, not $500. 500 watts tends to be the smallest. Like you could go to a Best Buy or a Micro Center if you like, I know they still make 350 watts and 400 watts. They're just not common. Pretty much any power supply is gonna, any of them, even the cheap ones, will replace this if you are strapped for cash. And considering you're still using a 6000 series, you're probably strapped for cash. So even a cheap power supply will handle this. So that's not a super expensive fix. It's just a little tedious. You have to unplug the wires, then replug the wires back in, take pictures of where the wires are connected and which direction they are keyed. They can only go in one way, but it's better to help you to prevent you from forcing them. A power supply is, of all the replacements to do, relatively simple. There's only 4 screws holding it in, 4 on the back. It comes out relatively easily. If that doesn't do it, then you may have a component that is seriously failing. And if it's not in the power supply, then it's in the power delivery system, probably in the power delivery system of either the graphics card or the motherboard. And with a system this old, pretty much either, I mean, with a system this old, the cheapest graphics card right now would be a significant upgrade. And even a slightly older motherboard and CPU would be an upgrade over this. So whichever it is, if you've eliminated the fans and the power supply is causing the problem, then you're at a point where it's time to make some replacements. The good news is, like we were talking about earlier, this is a standard ATX case. It will use off-the-shelf parts. The trouble is you're going to be limited by that power supply. If you haven't replaced it, it's 350 watts, which means you can only use 360. You can only use very, very low power parts. There's a reason the standard, the bottom end of the scale at this point is a 500 watt. That's the reason it's the 500 watt is the low end now. You'll be able to keep the case if you really want to, and if the graphics card isn't the problem, you still keep using that. Trying to find the cheapest way to keep using what you got. My gut says if there's something making a noise that loud and it's not any of the fans, the fact that it's happening at startup makes me feel like it's the motherboard more than it's the graphics card, because at startup, the motherboard draws more power and then settles down. The graphics card doesn't. The graphics card only starts drawing power when it's used for gaming or rendering or something like that. So the fact it's making that noise at startup, if it's not any of the fans and if it's not the power supply, then my gut is saying it's that motherboard causing it. And in which case, that's not a great PC case you've got there, but it's functional. It will work. It's not terrible. And it has if I'm looking closely, it has a side panel perforated, which is good. That's something you don't get a lot these days because they're all glass. So it does have pretty good ventilation on it, all told. So you can salvage some of this if you're you're really. Could it be the CD drive? Ooh, Raritor. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. It does have an optical drive in there. That could be making.
Okay, why would that spin up when he's gaming unless he's using the CD drive?
That's true. Yeah, it would spin up at startup, but it would only be doing that if he was gaming off a DVD, and that's kind of a rare use case these days. Good thought, though, Raritor. That is another thing that has moving parts, can make noise. It's probably not that on this one. So, Eric, good luck on this. Write us back. Let us know what happens. See if we can maybe help you out with it some more. All right. That's going to do it for this week. We will be back next Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern. If you have tech questions for Mike and myself, you can send those to requests at radio.air.com. We'll try to help you out with those. Otherwise, for Mike and myself, we'll see you next time. Night, everybody.